Moses announces the death of the firstborn. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will send only one more punishment on the king of Egypt and his people. After that, he will let you leave. In fact, he will drive all of you out of here. Now speak to the people of Israel and tell all of them to ask their neighbors for gold and silver jewelry. The Lord made the Egyptians respect the Israelites. Indeed, the officials and all the people considered Moses to be a very great man. Moses then said to the king, The Lord says, At about midnight I will go through Egypt, and every firstborn son in Egypt will die. From the king's son who is the heir to the throne to the son of the slave woman who grinds corn. The firstborn of all the cattle will die also. There will be loud crying all over Egypt, such as there has never been before or ever will be again. But not even a dog will bark at the Israelites or their animals. Then you will know that I, the Lord, make a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites. Moses concluded by saying, All your officials will come to me and bow down before me, and they will beg me to take all my people and go away. After that I will leave. Then in great anger Moses left the king. The Lord had said to Moses, The king will continue to refuse to listen to you in order that I may do more of my miracles in Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed all these miracles before the king, but the Lord made him stubborn, and he would not let the Israelites leave his country. The Passover. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, This month is to be the first month of the year for you. Give these instructions to the whole community of Israel. On the 10th day of this month, each man must choose either a lamb or a young goat for his household. If his animal is too small to eat a whole animal, he and his next door neighbor may share an animal in proportion to the number of people and the amount that each person can eat. You may choose either a sheep or a goat, but it must be a 1-year-old male without any defects. Then on the evening of the 14th day of the month, the whole community of Israel will kill the animals. The people are to take some of the blood and put it on the doorposts and above the doors of the houses in which the animals are to be eaten. That night the meat is to be roasted and eaten with bitter herbs and with bread made without yeast. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled, but eat it roasted whole, including the head, the legs, and the internal organs. You must not leave any of it until morning. If any is left over, it must be burnt. You are to eat it quickly, for you are to be dressed for travel, with your sandals on your feet and your stick in your hand. It is the Passover festival to honor me, the Lord. On that night I will go through the land of Egypt, killing every firstborn male, both human and animal, and punishing all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood on the doorposts will be a sign to mark the houses in which you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you and will not harm you when I punish the Egyptians. You must celebrate this day as a religious festival to remind you of what I, the Lord, have done. celebrated for all time to come. The festival of unleavened bread. The Lord said, "For 7 days you must not eat any bread made with yeast. Eat only unleavened bread. On the first day you are to get rid of all the yeast in your houses, for if anyone during those 7 days eats bread made with yeast, he shall no longer be considered one of my people. On the first day and again on the 7th day, you are to meet for worship. No work is to be done on those days, but you may prepare food. Keep this festival because it was on this day that I brought your tribes out of Egypt. For all time to come, you must celebrate this day as a festival. From the evening of the 14th day of the first month to the evening of the 21st day, you must not eat any bread made with yeast. For 7 days no yeast must be found in your houses. For if anyone native born or foreign eats bread made with yeast, he shall no longer be considered one of my people." The first Passover. Moses called for all the leaders of Israel and said to them, "Each of you is to choose a lamb or a young goat and kill it, so that your families can celebrate Passover. Take a sprig of hyssop, dip it in a bowl containing the animal's blood, and wipe the blood on the doorposts and the beam above the door of your house. Not one of you is to leave the house until morning. When the Lord goes through Egypt to kill the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the beams and the doorposts, and you will not let the angel of death enter your houses and kill you. You and your children must obey these rules forever. When you enter the land that the Lord has promised to give you, you must perform this ritual. When your children ask you, 'What does this ritual mean?' you will answer, 'It is the sacrifice of Passover to honor the Lord, because he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. He killed the Egyptians but spared us.' The Israelites knelt down and worshipped. Then they went and did what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. The death of the firstborn. At midnight the Lord killed all the firstborn sons in Egypt, from the king's son, who was the heir to the throne, to the son of the prisoner in the dungeon. All the firstborn of the animals were also killed. That night the king, his officials, and all the other Egyptians were awakened. There was loud crying throughout Egypt, because there was not one home in which there was not a dead son. That same night the king sent for Moses and Aaron and said, "Get out, you and your Israelites, leave my country, go and worship the Lord as you asked. Take your sheep, goats, and cattle and leave. Also pray for a blessing on me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country. They said, "We all will be dead if you don't leave." So the people filled their baking pans with unleavened dough, wrapped them in clothing, and carried them on their shoulders. The Israelites had done as Moses had said, and had asked the Egyptians for gold and silver jewelry and for clothing. The Lord made the Egyptians respect the people and give them what they asked for in this way. The Israelites carried away the wealth of the Egyptians. The Israelites leave Egypt. The Israelites set out on foot from Ramses for Sukkot. There were about 600,000 men, not counting women and children. A large number of other people and many sheep, goats, and cattle also went with them. They baked unleavened bread from the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, for they had been driven out of Egypt so suddenly that they did not have time to get their food ready or to prepare leavened dough. The Israelites had lived in Egypt for 430 years. On that day, 430 years ended, all the tribes of the Lord's people left Egypt. It was a night when the Lord kept watch to bring them out of Egypt. The same night is dedicated to the Lord for all time to come as a night when the Israelites must keep watch. Regulations about Passover. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "These are the Passover regulations. No foreigner shall eat the Passover meal, but any slave that you have bought may eat it, if you circumcise him first. No temporary resident or hired worker may eat it. The whole meal must be eaten in the house in which it was prepared. It must not be taken outside, and do not break any of the animal's bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate this festival, but no uncircumcised man may eat it. If a foreigner has settled among you and wants to celebrate Passover to honor the Lord, you must first circumcise all the males of his household. He is then to be treated like a native-born Israelite and may join in the festival. The same regulations apply to the native-born Israelites and to foreigners who settle among you. All the Israelites obeyed and did what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. On that day, the Lord brought the Israelite tribes out of Egypt. Dedication of the firstborn. The Lord said to Moses, "Dedicate all the firstborn males to me, for every firstborn male Israelite and every firstborn male animal belongs to me." The festival of the unleavened bread. Moses said to the people, "Remember this day, the day on which you left Egypt, the place where you were slaves. This is the day the Lord brought you out by his great power. No leavened bread is to be eaten. You are leaving Egypt on this day, in the first month, the month of Abib. The Lord solemnly promised your ancestors to give you the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. When he brings you into that rich and fertile land, you must celebrate this festival in the first month of every year. For 7 days you must eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is to be a festival to honor the Lord. For 7 days you must not eat any bread made with yeast. There must be no yeast in leavened bread or leavened bread anywhere in your land. When the festival begins, explain to your sons that you do all this because of what the Lord did for you when you left Egypt. This observance will be a reminder, like something tied on your hand or on your forehead. It will remind you to continue to recite and study the law of the Lord, because the Lord brought you out of Egypt by his great power. Celebrate this festival at the appointed time each year. The firstborn. The Lord will bring you into the land of the Canaanites, which he solemnly promised to you and your ancestors. When he gives it to you, you must offer every firstborn male to the Lord. Every firstborn male of your animals belongs to the Lord. But you must buy back from him every firstborn male donkey by offering a lamb in its place. If you do not want to buy back the donkey, break its neck. You must buy back every firstborn male child of yours. In the future, when your son asks what this observance means, you will answer him, by using great power, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, the place where we were slaves. When the king of Egypt was stubborn and refused to let us go, the Lord killed every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both human and animal. That is why we sacrifice every firstborn male animal to the Lord, but buy back our firstborn sons. This observance will be a reminder, like something tied on our heads or on our foreheads. It will remind us that the Lord brought us out of Egypt by his great power. The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. When the king of Egypt let the people go, God did not take them by the road that goes up the coast to Philistia. Although it was the shortest way, God thought, I do not want the people to change their minds and return to Egypt when they see that they are going to have to fight. Instead, he led them in a roundabout way through the desert towards the Red Sea. The Israelites were armed for battle. Moses took the body of Joseph with him, as Joseph had made the Israelites solemnly promise to do. Joseph had said, when God rescues you, you must carry my body with you from this place. The Israelites left Sukkot and camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. During the day, the Lord went in front of them in a pillar of cloud to show them the way, and during the night he went in front of them in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel night and day. The pillar of cloud was always in front of the people during the day, and the pillar of fire at night. Crossing the Red Sea, then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the Red Sea, near Baal-zephon. The king will think that the Israelites are wandering about in the country and are closed in by the desert. I will make him stubborn and he will pursue you, and my victory over the king and his army will bring me honor. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. The Israelites did as they were told. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had escaped, he and his officials changed their minds and said, what have we done? We have let the Israelites escape, and we have lost them as our slaves. The king got his war chariot and his army ready. He set out with all his chariots, including the 600 finest commanded by their officers. The Lord made the king stubborn, and he pursued the Israelites, who were leaving triumphantly. The Egyptians' army, with all the horses, chariots, and drivers, pursued them and caught up with them where they were camped by the Red Sea near Pi-hahiroth and Baal-zephon. When the Israelites saw the king and his army marching against them, they were terrified and cried out to the Lord for help. They said to Moses, weren't there any graves in Egypt? Did you have to bring us out here in the desert to die? Look what you have done by bringing us out of Egypt. Didn't we tell you before we left that this would happen? We told you to leave us alone and let us go on being slaves for the Egyptians. It would be better to be slaves there than to die here in the desert." Moses answered, "Don't be afraid. Stand your ground, and you will see what the Lord will do to save you today. You will never see these Egyptians again. The Lord will fight for you, and there is no need for you to do anything." The Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out for help? Tell the people to move forward. Lift up your stick and hold it out over the sea. The water will divide, and the Israelites will be able to walk through the sea on dry ground. I will make the Egyptians so stubborn that they will go in after them, and I will gain honor by my victory over the king, his army, his chariots, and his drivers. When I defeat them, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." The angel of the God who had been in front of the army of Israel moved and went to the rear. The pillar of cloud also moved until it was between the Egyptians and the Israelites. The cloud made it dark for the Egyptians, but gave light to the people of Israel, and so the armies could not come near each other all night. Moses held out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind. It blew all night and turned the sea into dry land. The water was divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry land, with walls of water on both sides. The Egyptians pursued them and went after them into the sea with all their horses, chariots, and drivers. Just before dawn, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw them into a panic. He made the wheels of their chariots get stuck, so they moved with great difficulty. The Egyptians said, "The Lord is fighting for the Israelites against us. Let's get out of here." The Lord said to Moses, "Hold out your hand over the sea, and the water will come back over the Egyptians and their chariots and drivers." So Moses held out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the water returned to its normal level. The Egyptians tried to escape from the water, but the Lord threw them into the sea. The water returned and covered the chariots, the drivers, and all the Egyptian army that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them was left. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on both sides. On that day, the Lord saved the people of Israel from the Egyptians, and the Israelites saw them lying dead on the seashore. When the Israelites saw the great power with which the Lord had defeated the Egyptians, they stood in awe of the Lord, and they had faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. The Song of Moses. Then Moses and the Israelites sang the song to the Lord. "I will sing to the Lord because he won a glorious victory. He has thrown the horses and their riders into the sea. The Lord is my strong defender. He is the one who has saved me. He is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will sing about his greatness. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. He threw Egypt's army and its chariots into the sea. The best of its officers were drowned in the Red Sea. The deep sea covered them. They sank to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, Lord, is awesome in power. It breaks the enemy in pieces. In majestic triumph, you overthrew your foes. Your anger blazes out and burns them up like straw. You blew on the sea, and the water piled up high. It stood up straight like a wall. The deepest part of the sea became solid. The enemy said, "I will pursue them and catch them. I will divide their wealth and take all I want. I will draw my sword and take all they have. But one breath from you, Lord, and the Egyptians were drowned. They sank like lead in the terrible water. Lord, who among the gods is like you? Who is like you, wonderful in holiness? Who can work miracles and mighty acts like yours? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed our enemies. Faithful to your promise, you led the people you had rescued. By your strength, you guided them to your sacred land. The nations have heard, and they tremble with fear. The Philistines are seized with terror. The leaders of Edom were terrified. Moab's mighty men were trembling. The people of Canaan lose their courage. Terror and dread fall upon them. They see your strength, O Lord, and stand helpless with fear until your people have marched past. The people you set free from slavery, you bring them in the plant them on your mountain, the place that you, Lord, have chosen for your home, the temple that you yourself have built. You, Lord, will be king forever and ever. The Song of Miriam. The Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. But when the Egyptians' chariots with their horses and drivers went into the sea, the Lord brought the water back, and it covered them. The prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine, and all the women followed her, playing tambourines and dancing. Miriam sang for them, "Sing to the Lord, because he has won a glorious victory. He has thrown the horses and their riders into the sea." Bitter water. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they walked through the desert, but found no water. Then they came to a place called Marah, but the water there was so bitter that they could not drink it. That is why it was named Marah. The people complained to Moses and asked, "What are we going to drink?" Moses prayed earnestly to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood, which he threw into the water, and the water became fit to drink. There the Lord gave them laws to live by, and there he also tested them. He said, "If you will obey me completely by doing what I consider right, and by keeping my commands, I will not punish you with any of the diseases that I brought on the Egyptians. I am the Lord, the one who heals you." Next, they came to Elm, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees. There they camped by the water.